This video is sponsored by the OneFootball app. It's the best football app on the planet. You can get lineup notifications as soon as the teams are announced on match days. You can get pre-match stats as well, goal alerts from games from all around the world, and league tables from around the world as well. You can add widgets to your home screen to keep tabs on Celtic's next fixture, who it's against, and what the kick-off time is. And if you're in Canada, France, or Spain, you can watch selected Scottish Premiership games for free on the app. You can download it by clicking the link in the description of this video. It's a great way for you to support Celtic Fans TV. So if you haven't downloaded it already, click the link below, get involved, and let me know what you think. I hope you enjoy the video. Martin, what's happening? It's been so long since you've been on. I had a look earlier. I think it was the 4th of October last year. You were on that game against St Johnstone where we had 2 late winners. Fair to say a lot's happened since then. What have you made briefly of this season before we start talking about the future and the rebuild in the summer?
Diabolical. A car crash all the way throughout. It was highlighted and picked up on numerous occasions by supporters, verbally and physically in the stadiums with displays. I think a lot of people could sort of see it happen, and there was a lot of complacency creeped into the mindset of the support. A lot of people thought it was a foregone conclusion. I think the board did as well. The signings were diabolical, both of the manager and of the players. And I think solely the responsibility lies with those that appointed Lennon in the showers. They have to take the brunt of the responsibility for failing to deliver what should have been fairly easy. I mean, the team that won it didn't get a glove laid on them. This is a team that admitted openly with their captain couldn't cope with pressure. We put them under no pressure. So many fundamental mistakes. Going to Dubai, no playing the game against Hibs, could have then subsequently put them under pressure. The situation with players, the situation with the different regulations and restrictions. The whole season was a car crash, and then the situation with the absolute media silence and contempt for the support, erecting banners, erecting barriers. The whole thing was just a total car crash. The only saving grace, I think, for the board and also the manager was the fact that supporters weren't in the stadium. And the only positive we can take for this season is the fact that next season cannot be anywhere close to as bad. So fingers crossed we kick on and do the right things, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But a lot is required at Celtic to change, starting with the mentality, and then obviously decisions as far as recruitment are concerned at every level of the club.
You talk about change there, and that is obviously the big word this summer. There's going to be a lot of change. Obviously, the new chief executive's coming in. There's a lot of talk about director of football, and I want to start with talking about the manager or the potential new manager or head coach. I would expect if we get a director of football, it'll be a head coach, obviously, but there's still a lot of talk about potential managers, so to speak. And today, the rumours have obviously been going mad the past week or so. It feels like it's really ramped up with Roy Keane, Eddie Howe. I think Thierry Henry's name even came into the equation. Don't know where that came from. And today Lucien Favre as well. So, I mean, so many names. It feels like we're being linked with just about every manager in world football.
That's an inevitability. I think if you've got a club like Celtic, everyone's going to be touted, and the problem being is that a lot of the names that have been flouted about just aren't close to the standards. Almost anyone that's out with a job within a managerial capacity has been linked with a Celtic job. Most of it, like players in the summer, a lot of it's nonsense. I think Celtic will probably do the work quietly, as they've informed us that the fans will have no transparency and be kept in the dark. But as far as the bringing in the manager and things like that, that's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as they understand the expectations of the support. And I think not that I speak for the support, I speak for myself, but I do think there's a sizable amount that want a guy that's going to come in, that's going to not necessarily just be a yes man, like what Lennon was appointed for, but someone that will actually sort of develop and voice his own understanding, a football mentality on the squad, have the ability or be supported if a director of football is coming in. It's talked that Fergal Harkin would take the job, which would be a phenomenal coup, to be honest with you. And if we could get the right recruitment in place and bring in a coach of a top calibre that can actually take the players forward, I'm not really interested in a relic or a angry media pundit like Keane. nor am I interested in a lot of the names that have been flouted. But I honestly don't believe, other than Howe, who I think is probably a distinct possibility, probably falls within our remit financially and what he could offer as a coach. Other than that, I think the ones that will be getting looked at maybe aren't necessarily the ones that are getting discussed in the papers. I think you might be surprised that even somebody that's currently in a job might be getting looked at for the position. But I just think someone needs to come in that can put a stamp on the team, create their own brand of football, actually allow the players to look at video analysis. That would be a good start. And a manager that understands the importance of training and having players that are fit and not just going on benders and eating pot noodles.
I think that the fitness has obviously been a huge issue this season. So I think something that we all probably feared when Neil Lennon was made permanent manager the second time round was that there could be a situation where there might have been a dip in standards or professionalism or fitness. It definitely seemed like that was the case, maybe on all three counts at times. So there's no doubt we've got to get someone who is going to come in and set a high bar in terms of professionalism and fitness. That's surely the bare minimums for a club of Celtic's stature. But when things have gone the way they've gone this season and the wheels have fallen off so badly, it just shows that you can't take that sort of stuff for granted. Eddie Howe is obviously the name that has come up most in the past sort of week or so. I think a lot of people really want him to be the next manager. There is a small portion of the support that think he's maybe not cut out in terms of experience or the size of clubs that he's managed. But what do you make of him as a candidate?
No, that's a fair point. That definitely is a fair point. I think all the things that you just described, though, we had it in Brendan Rodgers and more. We had it in absolute abundance. And domestically took us to another level, and he stifled with the players that he tried to bring in. Some of the players that he's now taken to Leicester, like Tielemans and Scani, and we looked at different players and we were told that we couldn't go and get them. So I'm not going to admonish him of blame. He ran away in the night in the way that he left Celtic falling, and I'm not absolving him of what he'd done. But what I will say, and I think anyone with half a brain would agree, as a coach, he improved every player. He made Scott Brown, gave him the best 2 seasons I've seen him in a Celtic jersey. Every single player's game went through the roof. If we're going to bring in a director of football and we're going to change the structure behind the scenes, then you can't bring in a manager. So as you pointed on earlier on, we need to bring in a head coach. So someone like Howe then fits the bill. He maybe doesn't understand the gravitas of the club, and he's maybe never worked at a team the size of Celtic. That is just evident. Bournemouth Stadium has less occupants in it than our main stand. So for people in England to say that he's managed in the Premiership, that means absolutely nothing. Celtic Football Club might not be technically the best football club in the world, but it undoubtedly is one of the biggest football clubs in the world. And the pressure that comes with Celtic is enormous. There's an expectancy to win every game. There's literally a worldwide support. There's an expectation more often than not at home that even if you get a draw, it's catastrophic. The pressure to manage Celtic is colossal. So I think if you had a holistic approach and you put people around them that understood that and could support them in doing so, his job would then just subsequently just to really improve the players and take them to another level. I think the lad has got that in his locker. I think he's young, ambitious, hungry, technically very good. I watched a few things. I don't know if you watched it. He done a technical session that got filmed once down at Bournemouth, and his training was just incredible. He's highly spoke of on the game, and he's a young aspiring manager, just like what Rodgers was when he was back in Swansea days and things like that before he took over at Liverpool. So I think the same is probably labelled him. And I'm not going to compare him to like a Guardiola at all, but we have to understand and remember that when Guardiola took over at Barcelona, he'd only managed the reserves. So it's not to suggest it couldn't work. Whoever comes in, I'm going to support them. It doesn't make a blind bit of difference. People have reservations. I did. I remember the day I come out of Hampden Park, walked along to the Brazen Head, met all my mates, heard that Lennon had been given the job. I was absolutely gutted. I went from euphoria to dismay in about half an hour because I knew what was going to happen. The exact same team that Ronnie Dyler inherited says that they were unfit and things like that. Just history repeated itself because there's only so long you can scream at somebody's face and motivate them. You need to be tactically savvy. You need to understand how to change systems, and you ultimately need to know how to manage players and be really good at that role. So if we can get someone in that can do that, all the better. But some of the names that have been floated around are our own. My biggest worry, though, is that in relation to history repeating itself, is that the board will stranglehold whoever comes in and curtail them from bringing in certain players that they've identified. What I would like to see is we bring through a better calibre of youth player, really make Lennoxtown profitable and bring through players that are top quality and can really step into the first team seamlessly and improve us, but also be able to identify better players in a different market like your Hodgson Edwards, as opposed to your £2-3 million Pookies of this world, and albeit doing well now at Norwich. But we've wasted so much money on so much nonsense. So if we can get one in that can do so and take it forward, then time will tell. But not just domestically, we need to be thinking further afield. We need to be looking. We need to have a strategy in place, a term of longevity, and thinking, right, where are we going to go? Is there success to win more leagues, or is there success to try and actually do something in Europe? And people can sniff at that, but you look at a comparable team with a comparable stadium with a comparable budget. You look what Ajax have produced. I mean, in the last 5 years, they've been in a European final. Currently still in Europe now. You look at teams like Salzburg and all that sort of stuff as well. So we need, basically, I think that whoever we bring in will be a direct representation, a tangible example of what the club think and where they want to take us. If we could go and get someone like a Rodgers again, take us to another level, and if supported properly, could have taken us further. Or we can go and get in someone like Keane, who I guarantee will be a golfing buddy for Dermot Desmond in a car crash and sack by January.
I think of what you touched on there, I think Eddie Howe's a good fit. I think we're a good fit for him, and he's a good fit for us. As I said in a video the other day, we're never going to be able to attract a manager who's been managing at top level for 20 years, has won hundreds of major honours. It's just not going to happen. So I think it's a good fit with Eddie Howe, and we'll see what happens with that. Just on you touched on Europe there. Interesting, I was reading today about the restructuring of the Champions League that looks like it's going to get passed for 2024. Now I've heard Celtic sort of mentioning that they're looking towards that sort of restructuring. From what I gather, and I don't know inside out, but they're going to eradicate the group phase, add more qualifiers somewhere. I don't know how that works. There's already plenty of qualifiers. And what they're going to do is allow 2 wildcard entries that will be the highest ranked teams who don't qualify through the league. So, for example, right now, Liverpool would be that team because they're sitting 7th in the table, but because they're the highest ranked team who haven't qualified through the league, they would go in as a wild card. So I don't know what the implications of that will be, but I know that Celtic were looking towards that restructuring in 2024 in terms of Europe, and I think you're right to say that we need. I said this after that interview, if you can call it that, we got with Dermot Desmond on a website a couple of weeks ago, that we need to know what the vision is, as you just said there. Like, where do the board want Celtic to be in the next 3 to 5 years? I think we got a wee bit too narrow in terms of our mindset domestically, all geared towards 10 in a row, and all of a sudden you look round about you and we're falling to pieces in Europe.
You spoke to me quite a few times last season, and every single time I had a chat with you, I said this exact thing. Last season, the season before, I constantly said that we had an unhealthy obsession with domestic success in a league that theoretically, financially, we should win because the disparity is enormous. Celtic, as a football club, should be judged in Europe. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that we should make a dent in the Champions League. The financial comparison is comparative probably between us and a Liverpool as it is us to Hamilton. But certainly there's going to be 3 tiers of football now. In the middle one, the Europa League, Celtic should be able to hold their own, not necessarily just get to a situation where we get to a last 82 and get bombed out by teams like Copenhagen. Fundamentally, since 2004, we've failed as a club. Domestic success has been incredible. We've almost, if you were born post 2000, you've almost known nothing but Celtic dominance. And my hope is that next season that mob go back under the rock and we batter them again. But that's all good and well. Celtic need to be so much more than that in every capacity. We constantly talk about the fact that they're a Champions League club, but they have domestic ambitions of success. So you really need to be putting in place structures that can take us to another level. And one thing fundamentally, and if I'll just touch on it quite quickly, I'm not going to labour it too much, but there's different initiatives now, which I'm so happy to see, things like Celtic Shared. And if people have got an opportunity, I would advise them to go on and just read what the guys are doing and advocating, and give them a wee follow on their page. But there's different finance initiatives now that are trying to basically create a degree of transparency, trying to challenge the board on narratives, trying to get them to be a wee bit more like just putting an explanation as to what their decision-making process is. And I think if you exclude your key demographic, your largest stakeholder, which is the support, we put in as a collective more than any shareholder. Always have, always will. 53,000 people renewed this year and have been treated with absolute disdain. So I think if we're going to go forward as a club, fundamentally we need to redress the balance, how we communicate with the support, how the support have a say in the club as we're the biggest stakeholder in the club, and ultimately what plan, what vision do we have for the club. So taking it back to European success or any attempt at whatever that may envisage, I would, for example, say success is just getting to after Christmas currently, and then taking it on for there, building, putting steps in place. But I think that they need to be more transparent with the fans. I think they need to be able to at least come out with some degree of a plan. Here's a 10-year vision. This is where we see ourselves working towards. This is the sort of steps that we're trying to implement. We're going to put in the best coaches we can in Lennox now. We're going to bring in the best director of football we can get. We're going to bring in a proper recruitment team. We've now got a new chief executive. We don't want a situation where he micromanages every single facet of the club. And we're going to try and allow the coach to develop the players, or have to obviously still work in the same financial parameters and structures where we develop players and sell them. But invariably, we're going to try and create more and have a better pool of players. If at least the board could be honest with the fans, then I think the fans could embrace and get on board with it. But I think, if in my personal opinion, in every year I've ever supported Celtic, home and away, I've never known a greater gulf between who perceive themselves to be the custodians of the club and who actually are the custodians of fans. I've never known a greater divide in my time watching Celtic, and it was scunnersome actually seeing the way that the support have been treated this season, between the barriers and the police and the situation with the fans and the club and all that sort of stuff. It's diabolical. So I think there's a big rebuild to go on, not just technically inside Celtic Park, but also with the support. And I think that could definitely start with acknowledging the financial contributions, the difficulty this year's caused, and giving the support something back. But a massive task, a Herculean effort, I think. Not like a lot of people will say, oh, it's hyperbole, you're exaggerating. Like, if we win the league next year, everything's fine. That in itself is the biggest problem. Just this mentality that we win the league, everything's cushy. Let's no. I think Celtic have to look further afield, and they've had plans now for a few years. And I know that Lawwell's had his finger in a few pies in Europe, and he's leaving now. But he'll have sowed a couple of seeds and tried to get Celtic to continue. And the only thing I find a bit baffling is the fact that they know if we win the league next season, we automatically qualify. Now, just in terms of short-termism, you would think if they can speculate to accumulate and know they're going to get 30, 40 million, why are they not going out and getting the managers or the players that can deliver that? Yeah, and I've heard a few rumbles. I heard a couple of guys like John Paul on a set of mind and all that sort of stuff. And he was talking away about, like, he spoke to quite a few guys in the club that are quite heavy and high up and well respected, and they're saying that Celtic are looking at chucking a good few pound at this and trying to do it properly. And I really hope that they do, but I hope that they don't just throw money at it for money's sake. I hope they actually have, as I say, have a strategic plan, but have the decency at least to explain that to the support. Just tell us where we're going, and try and develop better channels of communication, and allow the support to come along with the journey. Then it just allow us to be a cash cow and be used so they can sell season tickets to us. There has to be an appetite and a desire, I believe, for Celtic to kick on. And the only way you'll ever be judged in that, in my opinion, is in Europe, because if you're not competing in Europe, you're in irrelevance. No one really is that bothered if you win 10 titles in a row outside Scotland.
Aye, I think you're absolutely right there, and you're right to talk about the communication between the fans and the club, because I think if the communication had been better at times this season, that divide that you've talked about that's developed between the fans and the club wouldn't have happened. It would have been much, much closer. I think the lack of communication has just it's begotten this whole atmosphere of hostility between the fans and the board and the fans and the club that wouldn't have been there if there was maybe a bit more openness, a bit more transparency, and better communication. I do hope, and I'm led to believe, that the new chief executive, coming from a communications background, is going to have a more sort of inclusive, direct approach to communicating with the fans. And as you say, I think that's badly needed. To get back to thinking about managers, obviously I touched on earlier that Lucien Favre was linked with the job today. It said he was interested in it. I don't know where they've really got that from, and I don't expect it to be anything. Obviously, he's just left Dortmund not long ago. But I want to ask you something. Derek Vey done a thread on Favre, and he said that his personality while he was at Dortmund, that maybe didn't suit the club there because they're quite a passionate, emotional club. He's quite a quiet, maybe understated sort of coach. And I was thinking about Celtic in that sort of capacity. Do you think that holds any sway? Do you think that matters, the sort of personality of a manager in terms of the fit to the club? And like Celtic is a passionate, emotional club, but where do you think that lies in terms of having a balance between, if you put Boykin at one end and Lucien Favre at the other, you need to strike the right balance there?
Definitely. I don't think, as far as the support's concerned, there's no more. I'm not saying that I didn't really subscribe to this, we're the greatest fans in the world and we're this and that, but there undeniably is no more passionate or indeed emotional set of supporters in Celtic. Celtic, if you support Celtic, you breathe Celtic, you live it, you understand it, you think about it, you talk about it every single day of your life. So it's all consuming. It's every single day, not just on a Saturday. So a lot of clubs, especially top teams like Dortmund and all that stuff, they would have that as well. So for quieter, more reserved characters, it must be a wee bit difficult to cope with the magnitude of pressure for supporters living in the city and all the different facets that go about with the media and the pressure. But I think you're spot on when you say that you need to strike a balance. And I mean, it's totally two different sides of the spectrum. You've got one guy that's actually achieved as a manager, and another guy that done okay at Sunderland and got them at the Championship when we signed Scott Brown. In my personal opinion, Roy Keane's name shouldn't even get mentioned. He's stayed relevant in the game after being an absolutely world-class football player because he's a hostile, toxic pundit who, albeit talks a lot of sense at times, but is bonkers. As far as a manager's concerned, he's a non-starter because he's not a manager. And in the last 10 years, he's pretty much only been an assistant and ran a bit Chase Martin. So his name shouldn't even get mentioned as far as I'm concerned. As far as the boy for Dortmund is concerned, managed at a really top level, clearly understands the game, and I think a manager like him would be amazing at Celtic. Someone that can develop a philosophy, someone that can come in. I didn't really need a manager to come in and tell me that they know the words to the Boys Over Brigade and tell me that they've sang in the Gallagher. I think we need to get away as well.
Get away from.
We need to get away from this level of nepotism, because we've done it for absolute years. And I'm not going to lambast the guys that are at the club, because I think there is definitely a need for a relationship with old and new, so that people that come to the club understand what the club means. But it doesn't need to be through every level. Like a prime example, and I'll come straight back, I'll digress for 1 minute. Ian Bankier, when he got recruited, his very first press conference, he was absolutely hell-bent on telling the media that he went to a Catholic school. That is absolutely and utterly bizarre. Like, you've got situations as well where players and managers will come in and they're absolutely forced into telling you that they understand what the support is and hail, and you'll never walk alone. And it's all false. It's a lot of nonsense. And maybe a couple of cases it's correct. But even guys that purport to be Celtic men have never been in Celtic Park prior to when they were paid to be. So they're paid mercenaries, a lot of them. I have no problem in someone coming in with new ideas, new vision, a new approach to the club, and they don't have to sing off this hymn sheet that they understand Celtic to the core. guys, for example, like John Kennedy, very good servant. I think his time is to go. But previously, like when we've had situations like if you look at John Clark, that's just phenomenal. A guy that has given his entire life to Celtic, a tremendous kit man, a tremendous player, a Champions League winner, just phenomenal. One of the Lions. Having that relationship between old and new, I don't think is a bad thing. But we need to break this connection with things like managers and all that sort of stuff. You don't have to have a situation where any individual that either comes from a Celtic background or comes from Ireland is linked with the club. The exact same as when Shane Duffy was signed. Everyone was absolutely delighted just because he plays for the Free State. He's absolutely honking. Now, he's had different issues and all that at the club, but our level of recruitment is absolutely diabolical, both as a manager and as players. And if you look at 2000 on, barring Mowbray and Delia, if I'm correct in saying, we've never signed another manager that's not been Scottish or Irish. We can't think outside this current prism that we've enforced ourselves into. So I think something different is required, a change in mentality, a change in culture, and putting Celtic on a path that is directly and overtly ambitious and states from the outset what they want to do. I don't know if he's going to come. The reason I say that is because a lot of these guys, and a lot of it's their agents, they know that a job's available, so they tout their man and then they get column inches and then they're getting discussed. And then the exact same happened with Wife of Salisbury. So there will invariably be a couple of guys that flout their names about and tell you that they're interested, and they may well be. Understandably, Celtic's a massive job, but I personally, I'm not too concerned at the moment about who we get because one, I'm not best qualified to tell you who the best person is to bring into Celtic, nor are the vast majority of the supporters. I understand why they want certain people, and that's understandable. You're going to do that, but we don't know best. Just like we didn't know best about bringing Odsonne Edouard on loan. Nobody really heard him when he was at PSG as a youth player. Comes to Celtic, he's incredible. So we just need to go scout the proper person and bring somebody in and allow them to develop their own team. I mean, geez, look at the situation with Lennon. We handpicked a team for him and all that sort of stuff. Like we suffocated the guy's responsibility, and he was already in it, so we never really gave him much a chance. The next person that comes in needs to get all the opportunities that they can, the best possible staff, and a degree of patience as well if they're a bit younger. Say it as an Eddie Howe. He just needs a wee bit of time. We can't just expect him after 6 games. If he's not got 6 out of 6, he gets sacked. There has to be a needing in process. We just need to be a wee bit patient and try and develop a style and understanding and a brand of football. Let the players know their roles. Let the players know when they're coming into the team. This is what we were doing. Last season we were absolutely terrible. Couldn't cross a ball, couldn't defend a ball.
Players just looked lost at times.
Yeah, they did. They looked absolutely lost. There was no cohesion. There was no system. There was no plan. Manager, you could have set your watch. You knew when he was bringing players on. You know who he was bringing on. There was no change of shape. There was no instruction to the players when they were coming off. They looked dismayed. It was just absolutely murder.
It was like a shadow of Celtic, wasn't it?
On and off the park, absolute car crash. And I'm an absolute vociferous advocate that Celtic Football Club is much more than just the 90 minutes. It's all encompassing. And as a football club in its entirety last year, we failed catastrophically. So that needs to be looked at and rebalanced. And we need to really have a proper go this year. And for the next successive seasons, if we actually want to kick on and take the club to where it should be, in my opinion, which is at least competitive in European stage.
Yeah. Just to sort of round up, mate, you touched on the balance there between old and new in terms of the Celtic men and that sort of stuff. There's obviously going to be a lot of change on the park in terms of the playing personnel this summer, with a lot of players going back to their parent clubs, some big players' contracts running down. What do you think? I don't want to go through the whole squad with you, so give me 3 to 5 players who you think are absolutely integral for this rebuild.
Callum McGregor, Turnbull, Odsonne Edouard. That's never going to happen, unfortunately.
No.
But I'm an eternal optimist.
Like
Edouard, lot of time actually for young Welsh. I don't know if he's at the level we need. I think playing alongside a top player would improve him. And I'd like to say Ayer as well, if Ayer can actually learn to defend. Phenomenal on the ball, technically incredible, can stroll out for the back, immense at passing, so many attributes to his game, and I think in a different league he'd be a standout. But first and foremost, he needs to understand his bread and butter is to win and clear balls and have a willingness to defend. But I think you could really complement Welsh playing alongside someone like him and vice versa. I think the two of them could do well. I think Julian's obviously off. Greg Taylor should never get to wear a Celtic strip, even if he's running in the park or a garden. Laxalt's obviously off. We basically need a new defence. We need 3 new keepers. We need 2 wingers, 2 centre midfielders at least, and a whole new front line. I think Ayeti will probably get kept. It really depends on who the manager comes in and if the manager's allowed to pick his own players. I've never known a season though when we've needed so many players. I think there's about 7 loan players at Arpovsky. I doubt Mohamed Elanusa will stay. I think I'd like to see him stay actually. If I could see him fully fit and playing under an actual proper manager.
Playing in the right position as well, I think is important for him.
Absolutely. He's a serious player. And I think given time and confidence and having a manager that believes in him, you would get a tremendous return out of him. Whether Celtic will invest, I don't know. But certainly there's a small nucleus of that team. I think Christie will go. He'll leave to go to a club where he'll take 3,726 shots per game and get 1 on target. To be fair, it's hard actually to victimise and blame a lot of the players this season. I didn't like giving them too hard a time. I mean, they were an absolute shadow of themselves. But you don't turn into a bad player overnight. A lot of the players were still the same players that delivered us incredible success. So it's hard to give them it tight. And really, actually, if anything, it's an advert for why we need a proper manager.
Yeah.
But it shows you the importance of what a top manager does as well. But I've never really known of a season in a long time, long time since we've needed such a rebuild on the pitch. I think McGregor will stay. I'd make him captain. Turnbull, obviously, tremendous young player, really good, top technical. I didn't actually appreciate he was as good as he was when he came from Motherwell. Like the Lucas Sorrow, both of them should have been in earlier. Ayeti needs to get fit. It's probably a striker in him, but he needs to play up front with someone. Unfortunately, Edward will go to another level and then some, and probably continue to improve. He's on a trajectory like Van Dijk to go to the top of the game. Phenomenal player. It's just sad that the last season we never got to watch him play in the flesh. But there's a lot of players that as easy as it is to say, it's all the manager of the board, there has to be a balance struck. Some of the players invariably need to take responsibility for how calamitous the season was. And we really need to make sure there's an onus that we bring in the right players and not just accept absolute nonsense mediocrity, like players like Shane Duffy and like guys like, for example, I just touched on the other night, Greg Taylor. No disrespect to him. He seems like a nice enough guy. He's a workhorse. He's a Trojan. That, for me, does not cut at Celtic Football Club. You can't just run up and down a line, turn and try and play a 4-yard pass. You can't beat a man. He's technically inept. And I know he's filling big shoes coming in for Tierney, but if we could produce players like Tierney previously, we should be able to produce them again. Greg Taylor and players coming from Kilmarnock and that kind of standard are not the answer, period.
I think that's just about as good a note to end on as any, mate. Maybe not particularly the Greg Taylor one, but just to get your feel for the squad. Obviously, we could be here all night talking about the rest of the squad in terms of who's staying, who's going, and stuff like that. And it's interesting.
Sorry, I'll just finish on this. What about that John Joe Kenny?
Oh, I know. Aye, he was flattering to deceive people for the first few games there, but against Rangers he was terrible. I don't think he's going to stay around. Just the last one, and we'll make it a quick one. You touched on Callum McGregor becoming captain there. Do you think there's a risk that we might have a bit of a leadership vacuum because Brown's
Massive
going.
vote with Brown.
Ayer could go. I think Ayer's a leader in the team, despite his age. Do you think we could maybe have a wee leadership vacuum and we need to bring in some leaders in the summer as well?
Absolutely. And by the way, they're very hard to find. I was quite surprised that Brown left. I'm not surprised in the fact he's ambitious and wants to take that. And good luck to him. Good luck to him. He's been absolutely colossal for Celtic. Phenomenal servant. There's not many players you're ever going to see that will spend that length of time at a club and equally be as successful as he has been. He's definitely etched his name into the sort of pantheon of Celtic greats, and he deserves that recognition as well. A phenomenal player over the piece, but also just a natural leader. Gets so much out of the players. You can bring in a lot of good players. You can bring in technical players. You can bring in players with a lot of attributes, but you can't buy personalities like Scott Brown sort of too often. They're not 10 to a penny. So that'll be phenomenally difficult, understanding that balance, trying to get in a couple of guys that are really basically captains, vocal, that can really motivate the players, but also set a standard, lead by example. I understand why he went to Aberdeen, because he wants to go and get his coaching badges and kick on, and good luck to him. Even at his age now, he'll be the best player in that team by a distance, and he'll take their standard to another level. It's the best player they've ever signed. And that just kind of shows you the gulf as well, even within our league, considering when a lot of fans were saying he shouldn't be playing as often, and understandably so, because his legs are gone. But I think you really need to bring in leaders in key positions, and you need to strategically be able to identify them and understand. There might be a couple of players in there that might grow into the role, like a Turnbull and things like that, but it's very difficult, because I think, see just very quickly, because I know you want to wrap up, see when you compare and contrast a team like Martin O'Neill's team, who, and they're like the sort of cliche of men's men, but if you want to be pedantic, that's what they were.
Leaders
when
all
someone
over the pitch.
got hit, the leaders, there was 8 or 9 captains on the pitch. So if someone got a clatter in, you could guarantee that the other player was going to get scorned or was going to get throttled within about 10 seconds. They had guys that just wouldn't take any nonsense. They had absolute ability and quality, but matched that in the most part with controlled aggression. In the last year, we've witnessed a team, and at times, it cowards. So you've got a lot of players that didn't take responsibility, they're not taking opportunities, and they're definitely not communicating and talking to each other and setting a precedent on the pitch. So if Ayer does leave, you're correct. He is of a sort of leader calibre, quality player, and on his day, he'll be invaluable for whoever he goes to. I think he'll probably, if a team come in for him and he gets a good price, Celtic will let him go. I would love to see him stay. But in saying that, he has been at the club a long time. But there's a lot of players at the club that shy away when it gets hard, when it gets tough. They're not interested. There's very few last season that actually stood up, wanted on the ball, and tried to make things happen. And in most games, you were lucky if you could pick 2, maybe 3 players that would pass marks. Such was the diabolical standard of performance across the board, both for starting players and subs. So I just see a void in that team. I see a team lacking leadership. I see a team still technically decent players, but will they be able to be motivated enough in the park when it gets hard, when it will go down? Have they got the mentality and the resolve to rally and fight at times? I just didn't see it. So again, not for me to say who we need to go and buy, but a very tough decision for the guys coming in and who they're going to try and implement and pick, because there needs to be serious work done, and it could have been done years ago. We could have had an implementation when we had the opportunity to buy your guys like McGinns and all that sort of stuff, and we turned our nose up at it. So anyway, a lack of implementation and a lack of action a few years ago has cost us at the moment, because now we're going through a huge transitional period. But we've definitely got a job on our hands, and the sooner we can all get back to watch Celtic, the absolute better.
Absolutely. Now that is a good note to end on. I think that's something we can all agree on. Don't want to keep you too much longer, mate. Brilliant. Always great to talk to you.
Top man.